Hi, everybody. Welcome to another video. Today, we're going to be talking about how companies use Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes to, incorrectly state the enthusiasm for their scores. I'm joined by Dane Bornhold, who has been nice enough to put in an incredible amount of work into this thesis. And
Don't
we are also
don't
joined.
don't embarrass me more. Like they all know how much work I did. It's not a positive thing. I got into a data entry zone. I'm not proud of it. So
OCD.
Gotcha. Well, we are proud of the results here because what you've compiled is extraordinarily impressive.
oh
So
man,
we're very thankful. I'm also joined by Azimoto, who is going to be giving us sort of some context to what these numbers mean based on sort of his experience involving, uh, product product palatability, if you will. So, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dane, who I'm hoping will explain some of his. Uh,
so you started this. You did it when you did those Metacritic reviews for Kenobi, and you got me down this freaking rabbit hole. But I decided there was no way that people had this much enthusiasm, or as was stated on Rotten Tomatoes, for Wheel of Prime. So I idiotically decided to put it all into Excel by hand, kind of bringing me back to my nightmarish iBanking days. Anyways, it was. I'm not going to say it was fun while doing it, but when I really wanted to see the result, I got that single-minded focus, and I entered almost 2,700 review scores and their dates, and that's kind of what's on screen right here. Although this is not the overall score, this is the rolling 100 average. Because if you didn't do a rolling 100, this is, you see the line hop up and down, but it would get even more aggressive if you only took a smaller number. But this chart right here is it's 2,700 reviews based on the date that the review came in and what the last 100 average was. And then I put in some call-ins in the PowerPoint as far as critical events that happened. So you can definitely see how enthusiasm for the show wasn't super great at the start. It kind of tailed off. And then after episode 4, you got a lot of shilling. It dived down after the Steppen episodes. And then it really died down after the finale. And kind of ever since then, it's been hovering at a 2 out of 5 stars. Although more recently been dipping down, back down again. Anyways.
you provided some awesome context here, and I think it's sort of important to establish the time frames. Um, so the November 19th. What is the significance of that date?
That's the premiere date. So November 19th is when the first 3 episodes dropped, and it wasn't until a week later that you got the 4th episode. But also, you weren't able to get any of your reviews loaded up until November 19th. So anybody who is itching to basically give the show a positive review despite not having seen anything couldn't do it before November 19th.
So November 19th, it basically started at a 4.0. Um, you know, so we either have to conclude that, um, that was sort of intentionally the baseline that Amazon set, or that a massive number of people watched it immediately, loved it, and then over the next, by the second week, everything fell off, which I feel like doesn't make a ton of sense. I feel like it's far more, or I feel like it's far more believable that Amazon set it high immediately, and then fan reaction was more genuine over the course of the following
Well,
week, and
inputting the
that led to
data
the dip.
in inputting the data, I found it was either all or nothing. So it was very bimodal. So people are giving 4s and 5s. There aren't a whole lot of people reviewing in the 3s, but there are a lot of people reviewing at the half star. And that's the important thing to note about this graph. You can't actually review at a 0. The 0.5, that is the absolute minimum that could happen. And the lowest point of this chart, just so you guys are aware, it's right after or right on top of the W in Schill's work even harder after 04. That's at 1.25. There's 1.25 with 0.5 being the absolute minimum. So
And I
that
think
at that point, there's something like 85 half stars baked into that 100 rolling average.
ouch. I also think, early on, some of those fours were probably legitimate because, there was only 3 episodes and a lot of us still had a lot of hope that they could turn it around.
Right, and
Uh,
this begs the question as to whether any
right,
review before December 24th actually counts.
right,
Because
correct.
if we then look in our calendar, so everybody who reviewed prior to positive or negative prior to the finale, if they're giving a review over the whole season, they're doing it preemptively or they're doing it presumptively. Um, so yeah, the next slide, Alex, actually I inputted the data just ordinally. So this is removing the date stamps with everything. So here you can see that almost half the reviews were written before episode 4 came out.
Holy cow. That's crazy. Half of the reviews, were loaded up
Before November
within
24th.
Gotcha. I'd be curious to know, do you have the data for how many were loaded up the first day, like as soon as it opened?
Yeah, but give me a second here. I got to flip open a different laptop. Ozzy, you got anything to say about this?
Yeah, I think that it would be really cool. We know that real data is out there because Amazon knows how many streams they had of the first 4 episodes. And I think we all know people that maybe watched the first 3 or started the fourth or just bailed and said, this is god awful. We all know people that bailed in the middle of the first episode. So, uh, the enthusiasm definitely would tail and, people would stop even watching the show. And so people are not going to go give a review on Rotten Tomatoes if they, don't care about the show anymore. So
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
definitely,
Alex,
I actually do have that. I do have the biweekly numbers, Ozzy. I can we can put those up.
assuming you trust them, but okay, I guess we could trust them.
Well, they're Nielsen. They're
Okay.
as reliable as anybody's.
Okay,
Sorry,
they're
Dan.
unbiased. All right, well, unbiased as far as Amazon goes. As long as they're not from Amazon, then I'll buy it
There you go.
for a nickel.
Right. All right, Dan. What are we doing?
we had 505 reviews on the first day, 226 on the second, and the third day is going to take me a little bit longer to get.
Well, I think that first number is really all we need to, you know, to look at it. If we're saying that 20% of the reviews dropped on the first day, that tells you all you need to know, that um, a bunch of these reviews are basically not relevant.
So not only that, Alex, there were 1,164 of 2,695 reviews that came out before the 4th episode aired.
That's really interesting. And going back to uh, your previous slide, um, I do think that the what we're seeing as far as reviews generally match um, kind of the general consensus of these episodes. I think most people do consider the fourth episode the best episode.
Oh, but we
Uh,
haven't even rewatched that one yet. It's terrible.
well,
Yeah,
it's
well, it
terrible,
is,
but
but
it's
it's not from a TV, from a take yourself out a wheel of time, Dane, and it's the best episode from an actual making TV. That doesn't mean it's
yes.
as good as some
All
other
right,
good, but
you're prompting me to bring my A game on the next couple of rewatches.
all right,
Shots fired. All right.
yeah,
But, but
But I think this is more to the point, Alex, of what is the purpose of the reviewing site, right? because anybody being honest and feeling that I want to give a review of the Wheel of Time as a show, as a season, would wait until the 8th episode is aired in order to convey an opinion one way or the other. But obviously, the show shills, or who knows if they're paid for it or bots or whatnot, for them, the initial reaction is far more important. So you definitely see reviews everywhere kind of tapers off once the season's done. But yeah, over a third of all reviews happened before the 4th episode aired.
Yeah, and
Just
you know,
mind-boggling.
I think the Steppen episode really did just gut a lot of enthusiasm for the show. And I think
Oh yeah.
the 8th episode, in which we kind of saw this drop, was, had the same effect. And when you look at it, that the 8th episode really dropped the show down to, to 1.5 stars. That's about, you know it's about where it should be. I mean, if we're saying that 1 star is it, it turns on and plays when you press the button, then I'm not sure it's got anything going for it other than that. So I think this is phenomenal data, and I think it really does tell the picture
Now,
of just how grisly this was.
so the reason why we're doing this video on this as well, because I've had this for a little while, is in part I was tempted to kind of see, well, how many people do I need to brigade Rotten Tomatoes in order to get that popcorn bucket to tip over? And then I realized, well, I have all this data, so when I look at it, and something struck me, which was, so we have Rotten Tomatoes stated methodology for the popcorn bucket. So I'm just going to read it out here, just so there's no ambiguity. So the audience score is designated by a popcorn bucket. The score is the percentage of users who have rated a movie or show positively. There is also a section for verified ratings, which includes those that have actually bought tickets. Not relevant for this show. To receive a full popcorn bucket, at least 60% of the users must give the film or show a star rating of 3.5 or higher. A tipped over popcorn bucket indicates that less than 60% of users have given it a 3.5 or higher. So I have these 2,700 reviews, and I do a quick Excel if function, flagging anything at 3.5 or higher as a 1, flagging anything lower as a 0. You do a quick sum, and you got your totals. And at 3.5, it got me 50%, at least on this 2,700. It's not 62%. I had no idea where they got 62%. So I started fiddling with that threshold. Easy to do. All you got to do is change one cell if you've made your Excel formula correct. And I fiddled with it, and I brought the layer down and down and down. And it took me to get to 2 out of 5 stars. And that's when my results flagged as 62%, giving it a positive review. So I am wondering, quite honestly, if Rotten Tomatoes for this fucking show, and the popcorn bucket, the ever important 60% of viewers must like this to keep my popcorn bucket upright, just change their algorithm for the overall result from a 3.5 all the way down to a 2.
Yeah, and
It's
I think
shady.
what you've
That's
sorry, go ahead.
shady. That's shady as fuck. Now the only possible other explanation is that they're still counting reviews where people give a rating but they don't write anything. Because at the same time as having 2,695 written reviews with a score attached, the popcorn bucket says it's built off of 5,180 reviews. So there's another 40% or so of reviews out there that didn't come with anybody writing any words. All
You
they
just
did was
can't
rate,
see those.
and I can't see them, and I don't know. Yeah, nothing more, and I don't know the splits of them, right? So all I know is that if that's bringing the average of the 3.5s up, but it does it in a quite significant way, because as I stated, of the data that I have, the people who were moved enough to actually write something down, fully 50% of them were below that 3.5 threshold. in this remainder bucket, in order to get up to 62%, 75% of those reviewers who don't write anything would need to rate it at 3.5 or higher.
Gotcha.
Which
So what
is
was
so anybody who knows statistics, if these populations are supposed to be somewhat related or somewhat similar at all, getting a 25-point delta between two random populations like that, that's mind-bogglingly off.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're gonna say what was the mean score of the information that we have that you can verify?
So the average score that I have is 2.95 out of 5.
Okay, so if we're gonna say that the average is 2.95 and they need to get up to a 62. I know I'm crossing metrics here, but if we're going to say that to get up to a 62, that would be like 3.2 stars. You're talking a 15 to 20% difference just in the average score, based on what we can and can't see.
Yeah, it's mind-bogglingly weird. So it's basically, if you're going to review the show and only give a star, the people who are doing that and not bothering to write anything broke three out of four broke for giving it a positive rating, and only 1 out of 4. Now that could be true. So people who give this a 0.5 star review might want to vent about it, and therefore maybe the 0.5s are overrepresented in the population that actually writes a review. That being
Well,
said, maybe that's an explanation, but I don't want to give Rotten Tomatoes any credit for this at this point.
Well, if Rotten
no. And
Tomatoes wants to,
alternatively, if somebody loved a show so much that they're giving it a 10 out of 10, they should be equally motivated to write something down as somebody who hated it enough to vent. So I don't even
if
buy that argument.
if Rotten Tomatoes wants us to retract our statements, they need to make the API available to us so we can query their data.
I agree 100%. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes deserves absolutely zero benefit of the doubt for anything. I mean, we saw with Rise of Skywalker. Rise of Skywalker's audience score started at an 86 and hasn't moved in the 4 years since that movie premiered. So we know that Rotten Tomatoes plays games with this nonsense. And I'd be willing to bet that Rotten Tomatoes is hosted on an Amazon Web Service server. So
Yep, AWS probably.
yeah, so the idea that Rotten Tomatoes is playing games here is 100% possible.
Highly probable.
Yeah, but I mean, even if we give Rotten Tomatoes the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're telling the truth, which I don't think anybody should, this data is still pretty damning. And I think Ozzy,
Yeah,
you're
I think the
gonna
next
sort of
part,
go into
yeah,
this.
Yeah,
next
let's
part
move on to
kind of show why.
Ozzy's expert corporate analysis.
Yeah,
And I'll shut
so
up for a while.
yeah, no worries, Dane. So there's a philosophy called Net Promoter Score where you try and measure customer satisfaction. Many companies use this as a KPI to help improve their customer satisfaction. And basically, it's a 2-question survey. Would you recommend this, whatever it is, i.e., Wheel of Prime, to a friend or colleague on a scale of 0 to 10? And then the second question is, why did you give us the score you did, right? So essentially that translates into what Rotten Tomatoes is doing, although they're going from a 0.5 to a 5. So if we just double.
But this is actually, it's really good, right, Ozzy? Because
Right.
you're not allowed to give a 0 score, but the fact that you have a detractor here at 0 to 6,
Right. So yeah, the theory
Rotten
about
Tomatoes is at 3.5. 3.5 or higher
is a
keeps the
7.
popcorn bucket. Yeah.
So the theory behind this, and you would go with this way before you go Rotten Tomatoes, because Net Promoter Score has been sort of proven by many studies, many business studies. If you Google it, you'll just see tons of articles on this NPS. And basically, anybody that gives a 7 or an 8, which is a 3.5 or a 4, is just, yeah, okay, they're a positive person and they think it's okay, right? So that they're not really excited. Um, And then, so your 9 and 10s are your promoters, and those are people that really love what you're doing. And then your 0 to 6 are your detractors. And because if you're just ho hum, you're going to be a 7 or 8. So that's the theory behind it. So in calculating net promoter score, you throw out the 7s and 8s and you compare your promoters to your detractors to get yourself a score. So go ahead and hit the next slide, Alex. And so what we put together here, these are 11 examples of real net promoter score data from 0 to 10. Graphs, you'll have to dig in, but the main point of why we used 11 examples here is they all sort of track in the same general way. You've got
These are different companies, right, Ozzy? Like I don't know, like a soap company or a
different companies and or different years. These are all software companies.
Okay, software.
So you can see that there are, zeros and up to 6. So there's detractors, but pretty much the detractors never go over 10%. And then it just kind of climbs from there, and you do have promoters. So this is the 11 examples. So I hit the slide again. So this next one's taking Dane's data and mapping it as a net promoter score by just doubling the Rotten Tomatoes score, right? So there's no zeros, but you can see the ones are, which are the halves, are almost 25% of all of Dane's data. And then you can see the 10s are 15%. And there's not a lot of 9s, which means 4.5. So hit the next one, and we overlay all these results. And you can see how the Wheel of Prime data just doesn't track at all with sort of a standard distribution of people's opinions. And this is where I think Dane's point about this data is very suspect, in that there should be a lot more 4.5s than 5s. The fact, to me, the weirdest thing about the graph isn't necessarily how high the ones are, i.e. the 0.5 stars. It's that the 9s aren't up in the mess with the 10s. So that would make you believe that there's way more fake 10s, i.e. 5 stars, than there should be. And really, if you extrapolate this, maybe you'll be lucky to get 10% 5 stars if you think about that green curve. The downside of what I did is I didn't have any examples of really bad companies. So all these examples we showed have a positive net promoter score. And I think the next slide shows what Wheel of Prime, based on Dane's data, the net promoter score is -8. So, there's more detractors than promoters. And that's even given all those 10s, i.e. 5 stars. So if you're any kind of business person, or if you work for Amazon entertainment division, you wouldn't be very happy with the results of this show at all. And, I'm a believer that they're not idiots at Amazon running this. And I think that they do have good data, real data on measuring the performance of their shows. Those guys are data nerds over there at Amazon, and, they measure everything. And so I can guarantee you that they know that the fan base is not very enamored with this show. So that's just a quick and dirty on NPS on this. And I'm guessing that most entertainment companies measure success in this very similar way to this. They just don't talk about it publicly. And I think it goes into whether they renew shows. When they're kicking it around in the executive room, whether they're going to renew something, I'm sure they have some kind of metrics similar to this that they're going over when they're deciding to renew something, because it's big financial commitment, obviously. So I think next slide,
$100 million commitment.
Yeah. So, nobody's that stupid to just throw that away on something nobody's going to watch, right? So here's some of our conclusions. I kind of tried to roll up mine and Dane's conclusions here.
There's so many more 5s than 4.5s or 4s.
Right. And that's a big red flag to me. The
There
other
are
thing,
also a lot more 0.5s than anything else, but that's probably because 0 wasn't available.
yeah. Well, the other important thing about NPS is it's about passion, right? So if somebody's really happy with you, they'll give you feedback. They'll go in, they'll give you your 9 or your 10. Or if they're giving you a 9, they'll tell you, hey, here's what you got to do to get me to a 10, you know? And if they're really pissed at you, they'll give you the 0 or the 1 or the 2, and they'll tell you, Jesus, you did this, and this is why I'm never going to watch this or buy something from you again. And good companies look at that feedback and try and make corrections. That's the whole point of doing these kind of surveys. And so it's about passion. And so I think a lot of those 0.5s, Dane, are people hate this crap and are going in there and firing out those reviews. And I just don't see the passion on the other side. And
Well,
honest,
now
yeah,
the
go
one
ahead.
thing we have to qualify is that the review scores at least seem to imply that there were people who gave a rating, but then didn't write anything. So maybe that's all of the 3.5s, the 4s, and the 4.5s that they're missing kind of as the people who didn't bother to write anything down. But
Yep, could be.
without the API data, like you're saying, we probably don't know. But even then, like I did data entry almost 2,700 times over a couple of hours. I think I have a large enough sample size to
Yeah.
basically say that the rating scores or whatever that we found, even if it was only people who are motivated to write a few words going with their star rating, it's sufficient to basically run analysis this way.
Yeah. So
And
back it up one, Alex, just for grins. So that the way the curve looks on the front end here, where the 1s are so high and then the 2s and then it trends down, it really makes you think that those are more of the real ratings. Like if you go look at, let's say, all the reviews of an album on Amazon, and let's say it's like Slow Hand by Eric Clapton, and there's 10,000 reviews, and you mapped all the stars, I bet you the curve's going to look more like these positive ones. And then I don't know, I can't even pick a crappy album out. But if you pick a crappy album and you look at all the star reviews on Amazon, you'd probably see a different curve. And that's the kind of data that I'm sure Amazon's looking at, where nobody's going to go to Amazon and write a review if they don't really care. You would think. And I think those reviews you see when you buy something from Amazon, they have to put text in, right? So they can't just give star ratings; they're not going to get shown. So um, that's why I'm saying I think Amazon is very on top of how much people don't like this show.
really good insights on the NPS scores, Ozzy. I think people are going to take away from that, and the fact that the show looked so different from everything else that's kind of a normal.
Yeah.
Even with the tens that kind of hit exactly kind of in the middle of the bunch where they're supposed to be. So they have the same amount of full promoters, but they've got nobody there who is just kind of slightly more reserved with
Right.
their positivity. And they've got no one in the like seriously, as I was going through and doing all the data entry, I was noting, holy shit, there's no one rating in the 3s here.
Yeah, the middle is pretty anemic. That's just another statistical anomaly of that feedback. That
But it's kind of what I was highlighting, which is is there a reason why there's a difference between said populations, the people that just put a score and don't bother to write anything, versus because the people who go and take the time to review it and also share written thoughts, they're either going to love it or they're going to hate it. So maybe that's why, at least the data that I have, the detailed data is skewed to that kind of bimodal half star or five
yeah, that's
star.
probably true because people in the middle are not going to be passionate. Yeah.
The exact same type of people that would post a review on Rotten Tomatoes, right? Or Metacritic, right? Because there's a large swath that, yeah.
Well, the thing you got to understand is that what you're seeing there isn't atypical for television shows, and that's kind of why I'm the one hesitation that I have about this is we're comparing apples and oranges with this.
Yeah, that's where it would be nice to have more data. Where I talked to Dane yesterday about, can we pull down data from Reacher? Or, if we had the API, it'd be really cool to analyze the feedback on these different shows. I think Alex's point about if somebody's going to chew us up on this video, it's going to be about the apples to oranges thing. But I was
That's
just
what
trying
I'm.
to show, here's what a normal distribution would be of feedback on. That would be my argument on that.